Hello and welcome back to the Reuters Events Responsible Business USA 2020 virtual event. Today is day two of our 3-day broadcast. For those that managed to join us yesterday, I hope you found the discussions of value and use. And if you did miss any of the sessions, then do check out our on-demand page where we've got the recordings being uploaded at present and they're accessible for you. But don't do that just yet because we've got our opening keynote ready to get underway, and it's you'll see it on your screens already. We've first up, it's the opening keynote is the purpose keynote, business leadership in a new world order. A very timely discussion, I'm sure all of you will agree. And leading this discussion, we have Steve Rendle, the Chairman, President, and CEO of VF Corporation. And Steve is talking to Daryl Brewster, the CEO of CECP. Before I hand over to Daryl, I would like to remind all of you that this discussion is live. They're here to answer some of your questions, so do use the Q&A box to the side of the stream, and I'll try to address those as the discussion unfolds. But now it's my pleasure to hand over to you, Daryl.
Thanks so much, Liam, and good morning, everyone. Delighted today to have Steve Rendle, CEO and Chairman of VF Brands, with us. Truly one of the purpose-driven leaders we have in America today. So really looking forward to this conversation, and do look to your questions as you go through. I'll kind of get some started with a few, and then we'll see what others have to ask as well. Good morning, Steve. How are you today?
I'm great, Daryl. How about yourself?
Good. And you're joining us from Colorado, from the Rocky Mountains.
Yes, our new corporate headquarters in Denver. Yes.
Great. And I am here from the Carolina coast. So great to see you, Steve. When we did some of the research on this, we dug up an article a couple of years ago on you that said the 10 things you needed to know about Steve Rendle. We probably don't need to go through all 10 with the group today, but maybe highlight a couple of those that will help the audience get to know you as we spend some time together.
No, that's good. Yeah, that article, I forgot it had even been done. I would tell you the thing, what I think probably comes out of that article that maybe defines the most of who I am. Is I started my career at the first floor. In my early days at W.L. Gore & Associates, I spent educating retail staff about our new innovative product, and I spent a tremendous amount of time in manufacturing facilities, setting up and teaching people how to seam seal Gore-Tex jackets. And why that's important is I started at the very, very ground floor of the outdoor industry, learning about the products that we love to use, how they're made, how they're designed, the people that produce them, but also the retail stores where consumers come in and interact with brands, the importance of education and storytelling, within those retail environments. And as I grew through my career through W.L. Gore, I'm into leadership there. I worked a number of years for a Far East apparel manufacturer where I learned a tremendous amount around just adapting to and relating to different cultures, different people, and learned a lot about manufacturing. And then I joined the North Face in the early 90s, and grew there. Through sales leadership into business management, and through the acquisition of VF to where I find myself today. So it's really been a progression of learning opportunities. And I think in there is probably the next thing that I would talk to you about is, I've always kind of celebrated change and sought out change. Not change just for the sake of changing, but change to really push forward and find new ways of growth for myself, but also new ways of growth for the business. And I think that those are probably the two things, just, how I've learned about, the business and just this mentality I have around, just really getting comfortable with and celebrating, the power of change and evolution.
And that we'll talk a bit later about stakeholder capitalism, but one of the ways to understand stakeholder capitalism is to have dealt with each of those stakeholders along the way, which is so powerful. So that's great to hear. So now you've been at VF Brands for well over 2 decades. You were a founding board member of the Outdoor Foundation. You're an avid cyclist and all. We'll talk about corporate purpose in a bit and about your purpose territories at VF, which I love. What's your personal purpose? What's your why?
Yeah, my why is deeply seated in where I grew up and the experiences that I gained from, just really being in the outdoors, exploring the backcountry, skiing, cycling you referenced. My personal purpose is about empowering people to find and build their own personal sense of self. And I could talk to you about this for quite a while. When we initiated Purpose at VF, a number of years ago, I shared this story with my top 300 leaders, and it's somewhat personal, but I'll keep it edited.
Okay.
But I had a very, very important mentor in my early life that introduced me to climbing, both alpine and rock climbing, but more importantly, the community of climbers. And from that, I really gained insight into the value of trusted friendships, the value of carefully curated teams to accomplish objectives. And really, I think from that, the power of doing good for others. But it was a moment, of time with that particular person in my life that I gained a lot of understanding of who I was, a lot of self-esteem, and permission to be myself. And I think that's important today, is that we really do need to celebrate our individuality, celebrate each one of us as individuals with very specific points of view.
That's great. That's great. And so important these days as we prepare for an election and lots of debate, but just, different perspectives that we can bring to the party in a good way. Great. So talked a bit about your background of things to, worked up through the ranks, the power of self and how to really empower the group. Larry Fink, CEO of BlackRock and a CECP company, said without a sense of purpose, no company, either public or private, can achieve its full potential. So we talked about individual purpose. Why is purpose so important? And what is your sense of the purpose of VF brands in the purpose territories?
Right. Well, for us, purpose isn't something that you do. Purpose is really who you are. And the unlock for us at VF is when we came together and we curated our purpose statement, which is about powering movements of sustainable and active lifestyles for the betterment of people and the planet. And what sits in there are some very, very important elements here. Powering movements is about mobilizing our 50,000 global associates against some very specific objectives that are tied to those things that are important to our consumers, that are important to us, and important to the communities that we live in and work in. Powering movements of sustainable and active lifestyles really speaks to the power of the portfolio, that we have across outdoor, action sports, and work. And then it's really about, people on the planet. This is about, really, understanding, the value of each one of us, what's important to us, how do we try to make the world a better place, and certainly, how do we, protect, the environment that we've been given, and the power of really making a commitment to be a change in driving, environmental sustainability.
That's great. That's great. And VF, for those who don't know, VF brands is made up of a number of great brands. Maybe touch base a little bit about those. We'll talk about their purpose and purpose territories, but maybe we'll just start at least with some of those brands, and each of which is so distinctly positioned within the marketplace.
Yeah, no, that's very fair. So, we're made up of a very diverse, set of powerful global brands like Vans, the North Face, Timberland, Dickies, Icebreaker, and Smartwool, to just name a few. And each one of these brands has a very specific, objective, to enabling their consumers to enjoy those activities, that they're connected to. Clearly North Face is about outdoors, climbing, mountaineering, skiing. Vans is about creative self-expression anchored in skate and surf. Dickies is about work. And our Timberland brand, really it's a powerful outdoor brand, but with a deep connection to community and environmental sustainability. And the purpose that we've created, gives us meaning beyond just delivering, profit and value to our shareholders. It really extends the meaning of our value to our stakeholders, our consumers, where we've really spent the time understanding what was important to them. Because in the end, we see consumers making choices on the brands that they interact with, the brands that they engage with, and they ultimately purchase products from, anchored in what do you stand for? Do I align with what you stand for? And do I really want to be part of that community that you're driving?
Great, great. I mean, you've been at this. This was not on our exact list, but you've been at this for a number of years with North Face and others. Is this something you're seeing even more interest by consumers today than you had in the past?
We absolutely are. And we started this journey, we've always had, a level of purpose in what our brands do, but this really began back in 2015 and 2016, where specifically here in North America, we saw quite a bit of change going on in the market across retail, shift from from in-store purchases to online purchases. But as we dug deeper into what was motivating consumers, they were starting to make choices based on what you stood for, what your position was around climate change. Were you producing products that were sustainable and done in a responsible way? And that just gave us greater validation to put this stake in the ground and begin to drive forward. And today, we have really strong evidence that the millennial and Gen Z consumer, about 2/3 of them, have made very clear, decision to interact with only those brands that share the values that they have. And if you fast forward, 2027, 2030, that age group, those cohorts will make up about 2/3 of North America's consuming public. So there's a business reason why you do that. And for us, we call this the power of and. It's a purpose-led organization with a performance-driven mindset that delivers value for our shareholders, our stakeholders. But most importantly, we're delivering value to our consumers, and our number one consumer is our employee.
Okay, that's great. And we'll talk a little bit about stakeholder capitalism here in a second. It is for some, they used to talk about the 4 P's of marketing: product, price, promotion, and placement. And I think the new 5th P is purpose, right? Is what does that brand, that company stand for? And you all have really articulated that well. That's great.
Yep, totally
so moving a little bit to stakeholder capitalism. And you've mentioned a lot of your key stakeholders. Lots of talk about that with the Business Roundtable statement out, 15 months or so ago. How do you see that evolving? You connect those really to long-term shareholder value as well. How do you see that all kind of coming together and playing out here?
Well, I think it's definitely gaining momentum. And Larry Fink's letter that you referenced earlier, the Business Roundtable. There's a number of global companies that are understanding the importance of being very engaged with people, communities, and doing good beyond just delivering results to our shareholders. Investors are starting to make decisions based on what you stand for and in a more broad set of ESG principles. I think we're at the early stages, Daryl, but I think it's gaining momentum. And why it's gaining momentum is consumers are driving it. And in the end, consumers are who businesses serve. And if we're having a deep understanding and connection to what's valuable to our consumers, this will only gain momentum and be more important in the future.
That's great. That's great. In fact, CECP just published a paper last week on the return on purpose, really looking at research results about the companies that have a high purpose companies outperform over time. Maybe not quarter to quarter, but over time as we go through that. For the audience, please, if you have those questions, start to send those in. We have a bunch here, but I'd like to get to yours as well. You've kind of shared a lot about purpose, a lot about that long-term strategy, but the last 7-8 months have been crazy for us all. In the COVID world, social unrest, racial equality, and all the others. Tell me a little bit about how you and VF Brands responded to really unprecedented change on so many different fronts.
Right. Well, go back to our purpose, where we're very focused on people and the planet. From the very beginnings of the pandemic in Asia, we have a significant business in Asia, China specifically. We took a people first approach, and we quickly wrapped our arms around our employees. We closed our offices, we closed our retail stores. We did not lay off any of our employees. We maintained full employment.
Wow.
And what we learned in Asia quickly was applied to Europe and North America as the pandemic spread across the globe. But we took this people first approach, understanding what was it our employees needed to feel safe, to be in a healthy environment. What do they need to do to continue to work for those of us that could go home and perform our job? For those retail associates who no longer had a store to go to, how did we keep them engaged? How did we have them continue to be part of our journey forward? Knowing that this pandemic would have a beginning and an end, how did we, really survive this from the beginning? And our distribution center associates, we made the decision early that we would keep our distribution centers open, but we would not do that unless we could provide a safe, clean environment, with the proper controls from PPE to distancing, daily sanitizing of our work environments, so our employees could feel comfortable and safe coming to work. And we took an approach of really thinking about the now, and what did our people need? What did we need to do to preserve the health and well-being of our enterprise? Liquidity to be able to endure, what could be a protracted time. But we also started to think about the next, and not just dwelling today, but what would we need to be doing to emerge even stronger and in a better position, to compete and ultimately serve our consumers in what we knew would be a very different, new environment.
Right. I mean, it sounds like your overall purpose, your why, your North Star really provided a guiding light, not the roadmap per se, but the guiding light as you went through this.
It absolutely did. And that people first approach for our own people.
Right.
We applied that to our partners, our supply partners around the world that produce the garments, produce the materials, that we depend on. How could we help them, with understanding proper safety protocols, helping them, access capital where they may not have been able to do it on their own. But we also took a really interesting approach with our consumers. As we entered the pandemic, we continued to just put advertisements in front of our consumers about purchasing, this season's product. And it hit us like, wow, that is incredibly tone deaf. We're all dealing, with a crisis of a magnitude we've never seen. There's fear, there's concern, there's anxiety. The last thing people want to do is think about buying, next year's product. So we shifted our tone, and we began to come, speak to our consumers, through a point of empathy, understanding, relating where we were, where they are, and we started to bring fun, into our communications as everything switched to digital. But created moments where communities of people could come together, enjoy what our brands stand for, and ultimately build loyalty and long-term brand love. To my point of how could we emerge even stronger? After 6 months through our fiscal year, our digital business is up over 60%.
Wow.
So despite people being in a very different environment, that shift of connecting with consumers, really respecting where they were and trying to bring moments of fun to break the the tension and the monotony, has resulted in greater loyalty, certainly a larger consumer base, but one that's very interested in walking with us.
Sure. And for those listening, I mean, this idea of a retail business in these very difficult times, not furloughing, not laying off anybody, but staying to its purpose is really remarkable. The other thing I'm really impressed by is how you kind of learned as you went through, right? You learned from China, helped you for Europe, helped you for the States, which others would do the same, I think. At the same time, you found out your message was off a bit and you had to adjust the tone accordingly to where the world was.
Right.
Yep. Yeah. So the focus of now, people first, now, and then what's next is so critical as that comes through. Well, we're getting a lot of questions coming in here from the group, so we'll ask a few of those. First question from the audience here, how does being both president, CEO, chairman, promote good corporate governance? So question from the audience. One that comes up from time to time.
Yeah, there you go. So that's something that our board of directors has worked quite a bit on, and I think from a corporate governance standpoint, my role as president and CEO, driving the day-to-day strategy and execution of how VF operates is extremely important. My role as chairman in engaging with our board on all issues around governance, engaging them in our strategy. We find, that having these roles combined with the power of a lead director, working across, our committee chairs, we've struck a balance where we feel very confident about our ability to have proper, thoughtful governance, for all matters for shareholders and stakeholders, combined with that representation of the day-to-day business.
Great. No, great. Thanks for that. And I know a lot of people have those questions, but people miss the power of a lead director and good governance practices. That the titles aren't always as critical as they sometimes seem. I think that's some folks. Another question in from the group: how has your tenure with VF given you a longer-term leadership perspective and goals? How has the long-term goal setting paid off for the group?
It's interesting as I sat thinking about what we would talk about today. I've been with VF over 20 years. It's hard to sit in a chair and think you've been part of an organization or a team for that point in time. I think from a long-term strategy standpoint, I've lived through business strategies, enterprise strategies, and how to integrate those into the way that VF operates. We are a brand first enterprise. We have strong enterprise functions that we build, capabilities that we leverage across our brands. But I think what we've learned is that strategy is a dynamic process, and where we are today, with a deep commitment to consumers and a focus on becoming more retail driven in the actions, using more and more digital tools. This is a strategy that will be alive and evolving as the consumer evolves. We need to evolve, and I think it's that understanding. Looking back over history, looking at the evolution of the different actions we've taken, the mistakes we've made, the good decisions we've made, the opportunities that we've been able to capture. It's that learning around, what I said earlier. Being willing to change, being willing to evolve, being able to learn, and continue to put yourself in a position of strength.
And this is one of the great balancing acts that you have, which is staying true to the purpose of the organization while also evolving to changing conditions. And COVID's a pretty clear example of that.
Right.
Very, very good. A few other questions. In short term, we'll come back. The list of questions is growing. Just wanted to touch base a little bit more on things going on right now. COVID-19 impact on your community strategy. Another question that has kind of come in, and how you think about communities during a time when so many are going through difficult times.
Right. Yeah. So as I mentioned, we've quickly wrapped our arms around our people, and as we became very comfortable with the approach, the controls, and our ability to engage and enable our employees to work safely and comfortably, we concurrently thought about the communities that we live and work in. And here in Denver, we quickly understood through relationships with our governor that there was a deep need to support, Colorado, just not Denver. And quickly through our foundation, made a financial contribution to assist, the needs in Colorado. We did the same in our Swiss office. We've done the same things in other parts of our European business, in Asia. Really utilizing our local talent and the local connections to those communities where we live and work, to support those people, those stakeholders. At the same time, we also stayed very true to some of our other purpose-led contributions around the environment, sustainability, and here in the United States, social justice certainly came on the radar in a greater way, and we continue to mobilize our foundation there as well.
Great. Yeah, and I did want to touch base on racial justice and social justice, which as COVID is an issue that's been around for a long time, but really I think surfaced in terms of people's concerns over that. Internal, external actions you've taken relative to social justice, racial equity. I know you even mentioned some things on your earnings call about your DEI strategy, and that that's not the traditional topic mentioned on an earnings call, though frankly it probably should be. So your thoughts on that incredibly important topic.
Yeah, I'll start with the DEI comment. We've had a commitment from my first day as CEO, and it's not that VF didn't in the past, but it was part of our purpose journey. That we needed to really pay closer attention to the inclusive environment that we created across our brands. We're a large global business, multiple cultures. Empathy is a requirement, certainly for how we learn and work with one another. But our commitment to inclusion and creating a diverse workforce, both gender and ethnicity, is critical, because at the core of that is, in our belief, is that we need to have a strong collaborative culture populated by people that represent the diversity of our consumers. And the more we as an employee base can reflect who our consumers are, we think the better we will be able to serve them. And as to the social justice question, when the tragic incidents hit here in the United States, it hit our organization hard. We really do take it seriously about how to care for one another, the deep sense of empathy that we have across our culture. And what we did first, really led by our BIPOC leaders, was we established listening sessions. And these were sessions that we did on Zoom, but were attended by 1,500, 1,600 associates across the globe. And they were moments where people could share. People could speak openly about what they were feeling, the pain that they had, the anxiety, the fear. And the thing that I learned, the most from this is that when people can begin to share, that's the beginning of healing. And as we were able to begin to heal as an employee base, we brought together a group of leaders, not senior executive leaders, but leaders across important parts of our business, from our distribution centers, our retail stores, different parts of our brand teams. And it's a group of people that are about really a committee about advancing racial equity, not only inside our organization, but how do we touch the communities and society at large across three very important topics. One is around education, advancement, and really access to development. The other is around economic equity, and the other is around environmental and social justice. And we think about our own people, we think about the communities we live and work in, but we also think about where can we be really a point of change, to drive different behaviors, in society at large.
That's great. That's great. Certainly a topic I think it's so many CEOs are really embracing today. And we've collected a couple hundred statements the companies have made, and now people are just turning that now into action. Okay, so this is great. So it's great to see that work you have. A number of questions is continuing to roll in. This is back to purpose a bit. How does the purpose of today relate to the cause marketing that we heard about in the 90s? How do you see the differences between those?
I think purpose today, and I'll speak for us, VF Corporation and our brands. Our purpose is informed by what is important to our consumers. And I made a comment, that our number one consumer is our employee. The purpose that we created was curated, through interactions with close to 2,000 associates across the globe, all levels of the organization, where we coalesced around this statement. And it has meaning to us. As I said earlier, purpose isn't something you do, it's who you are. And I think today purpose is more deeply embedded in organizations and people. And for us, we're making the decision. It's the power of and. How can we make it assure that all decisions are anchored in driving purpose? How can all decisions be driven by driving our profitable business forward? Because in that synergy, sits value creation for shareholders and stakeholders, and most importantly, the people that we depend on, both from a consumer standpoint, but the people we employ.
It's terrific. Great. Another question in, and then I think we have a wrap up coming after that one. But specific question on VF Corporation became the first apparel company to issue a green bond, and some real interest in the audience about what was the reasoning behind that. And then we'll look to wrap up here as we keep things on schedule.
The reason behind that was to access capital, but in the part of the market, where there's a deep understanding and respect for those commitments that we're making around environmental sustainability. And last year, we were one of the first apparel and footwear companies to publish science-based targets, and really put forward, these targets to hold ourselves accountable. And, the value of that green bond is certainly to bring, create capital that we can invest against our sustainability journey and ultimately drive value against that purpose, performance-driven part of our business strategy.
That's great. Well, just wrap up here. I have the privilege in my role to talk with CEOs, more than one CEO a day, I think, throughout the year. And you have really moved way up on my list as favorite CEOs and the work you've done around purpose, people, the planet, sharing around healing, the power of and adjusting and adapting to a changing world, which we're all in, yet retaining that purpose. As we wrap, what do you see as we look out? Now, we can't get too far, not next week perhaps, but as we think out a year or two, what do you see in the role of business and for FreeF brands?
Right. I think the role of business, I think we're all learning, that we have to take a much more proactive level of engagement and be part of the solution. And the power of public and private partnerships, we certainly see that in Colorado. One of the reasons we relocated, a number of our outdoor businesses and our corporate headquarters there. Corporations must step forward and be part of the change. We need to pay attention to our communities, our consumers, and make decisions that ultimately, create more good. For VF, we have a very clear strategy, and it's proven, its value today where we are, and we will just, continue to remain committed to our transformation, to serve our consumers, to become more retail centric and hyper digital in how we operate, and use purpose and performance driven, thinking to drive value for our shareholders.
Very good. Steve, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much. I know our audience, by looking at all my the questions are just, could be on here for several days, but thank you for your openness, for your transparency, and also for your purpose-driven leadership. So greatly appreciated, and all the best to all the team there with North Face and Vans and all the great brands and Dickies that you all have as part of the VF portfolio. All the
Great.
best. Cheers.
Thank you, Daryl. Great talking.
Good.